So coming back from my linebacker portion of the NFL draft big board, and so this video I'm going to be doing my top 10 and then 5 outside formats, so kind of the format I started with in the first place. So yesterday I did my defensive end / edge rusher. If you haven't seen that yet, I will be posting the link to the entire playlist in the description below, as well as probably having both those links in my outro as well. So start off with my number 1, and I have the... One second. Alright, so I have the 6'1", 230-pound linebacker out of UCLA, and that is Myles Jack. So there's a little bit of debate between Myles Jack and Jalen Smith, the first overall spot in the linebacker position. I think that belongs to Myles Jack. He's probably the most athletic of any linebacker in this draft. Obviously, he played running back for a little bit of time at UCLA, and for me, he projects as probably a top 15 pick. A knee injury ended his season early this year. Couldn't say that right, but shouldn't be too big of a problem long term. And I think he did declare early just so he could avoid having to deal with maybe another knee injury while he was in college. Runs a solid 40 time, about a 4.5 to a 4.6, so that's another good thing for him. Will probably fit in as an outside linebacker in probably in either a 3-4 or a 4-3 scheme. Not a very heavy edge rusher though, which is also why I have him on my linebacker spot, not the edge rusher. That's another thing I wanted to mention. There was a few guys that I mentioned, or that I had as edge rushers, not as linebackers. A few of the names: Leonard Floyd, Scooby Wright. Let's see if I missed any of them. Daddy Nicholas, Kevin Dodd, Yannick Gaku, Jordan Jenkins, Charles Tapper, and there are a few on the 5 outside. So anyway, move on to my second linebacker, and that is the 6'2", 235-pounder out of Notre Dame, Jalen Smith. So Jalen Smith for me can fit in at either the outside linebacker or inside linebacker position. He's got a very great nose for the ball. Not as athletic as Myles Jack, but might have a higher football IQ. Again, another guy that suffered a knee injury, a torn MCL and ACL to finish off the year, which might have cost his draft stock a little bit. But still, I think he's still a mid-first round pick. That's why I have him projected as. Like I said, not as much athleticism as some of the other guys at the top of the board at linebacker position. But again, he's a very, very, very good linebacker with a really good nose for the ball. Alright, so move on to my third linebacker. And I have the 6'2", 254-pounder out of Alabama, Reggie Ragland. So for me, Ragland projects as a late first-round pick because his speed isn't really up to par with most of the linebackers around him. I mentioned Jalen Smith being a little bit, being maybe not as athletic as the rest of the guys, but Reggie Ragland, that's probably why he drops down so far. I think he's got as good a football sense as really any linebacker in this draft. He's a great leader. He was a great leader at Alabama and put up some pretty monster stats this year. 102 tackles, 6.5 for loss, 2.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. So good stats this year. Like I said, I think Reggie Ragland projects as a late first-round pick. He basically, everything outside of his athletic ability is very, very, very high. All the rest of his intangibles, toughness, instincts, all that sort of stuff. So move on to my number 4 linebacker, and this is where I think there's a decent sized drop off between number 3 and number 4. But I have the 6'1", 235-pound linebacker out of Missouri, and that is Kentrell Brothers. So Kentrell Brothers did a little bit of everything for Mizzou this year. Had a monster season. 152 tackles, 12 for loss, 2.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 3 passes. There's a lot. He fits in well as an inside or outside linebacker. He's got decent speed, runs about a 4.6 40. Not as big as some of the other linebackers, but at the same time, like I said, he is pretty athletic, and he definitely puts up the stats that you want to see. He was one of the lone bright spots of a Mizzou team that really struggled this year. And for me, he projects as a second to third round pick. Probably mid-second round will be closer to where I'd see him going. Like I said, I think there's going to be a big drop between Reggie Ragland and Kentrell Brothers. Alright, so move on to my number 5 linebacker. And I've got the 6'1", 220-pounder out of Florida, Antonio Morrison. So I think the most famous thing I know Antonio Morrison for was getting arrested last year. I believe this was last year, might have been 2 years ago, for barking at a dog. So, obviously I think he finished out his college career okay. While I say that, I don't think he's too much of a risk. I think he did some stupid stuff, but what college kid doesn't? He's got, I'd say, a little bit above average measurables. He's got decent speed, again, runs about a 4.6 to 4.65 40. He's an athletic guy. For me, projects as probably a late second round pick, but second to third round as a whole. But again, a guy that put up pretty good stats at Florida, over 100 tackles, more than about 12 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. So I think he's a do-it-all guy. He fits in as an inside or outside linebacker, and I think that could be a little versatile piece that maybe lets him slide up and maybe as high as the mid-second round. Alright, so move on to my number, I believe it's 6 linebacker. And he is the 6'2", 228-pounder out of Ohio State, and that's Darren Lee. So I think that Darren Lee didn't quite put up the stats that I guess some people expected him to. He replaced Ryan Shazier, who was a very, very good linebacker at Ohio State, a first-round pick last year. And actually, I think that was 2 years ago. Yeah, that was 2 years ago. So, he's declaring early, so he's not going to have a whole lot of, or he's not going to have a lot of stuff to prove himself at. No Senior Bowl, probably the Combine though. He's got very, very good measurables. Runs a 4.6 flat 40. For me, he projects as probably a late second round pick. I could see him sliding up above Kentrell Brothers and Antonio Morrison. I have those guys a little bit higher just because I think they're a little bit more proven, put up a little bit better stats this year. But like I said, I think Darren Lee could easily slide above those two. And if he does have a draft stock that trends up high, which I could see it happening, he does have a lot of upside, he could go as high as the early second round. Alright, so move on to my number 8 linebacker, and this is another drop-off, again in my opinion, between 6 and 7, and that is the 6'2", 252-pounder out of LSU, and that's Kendall Beckwith. Now, for me, Beckwith, I'm not sure if he's going to, I'm not 100% sure if he's going to the draft, and he hasn't, I don't think he's officially declared yet. From what I've heard, it's about 50-50, but if he does go, this is where I'm going to have him. I've taken a lot of guys out of the draft because, or my rankings, because they either said they were going to return or were more likely to return than not. This guy's about 50-50, but for me, he's a guy, with very good football instincts, very good tackler, and really is more of a behind-the-scenes guy that I think could actually end up being a very serviceable player in the NFL. Not the best measurables, runs about a 4.75 40, so not the fastest guy in this draft. He is a little bit bigger though at 6'2", 252, and outweighs most of the linebackers on this list. Like I said, not 100% sure if he's going to declare. If he does declare, then I'm going to end up taking him out of my overall big board rankings when I do my overall rankings after I'm done with all the positional rankings. Alright, so move on to my number 8 linebacker, and he is the 6'2", 245-pounder out of Stanford. It's Blake Martinez. So for me, Blake Martinez projects as around a 3rd, 4th round pick. I'd say late 3rd round would probably be the place that he ends up with. He's got a Senior Bowl that he can prove himself at. I think Blake Martinez is about as steady a draft stock as you'll find in this list, though. He runs about a 4.8 flat 40, so not a very fast guy. Put up extremely good stats this year, though. 141 tackles, including an interception, 6.5 tackles for loss. So I think a guy that proved himself that he can play when he needs, or that he can play well when he needs to, but also a guy that I don't know how much upside he has in the NFL. Like I said, pretty steady draft stock. You pretty much know what you're going to get when you draft him. So move on to my number 9 linebacker, and he is the 6'2", 238-pounder out of Mississippi State, Beniquez Brown. So, had a good season this year, 99 tackles, 11 for loss, 4 sacks. So, again, good stats. Not the slowest, but not the fastest guy in the draft either. Runs about a 4.7 flat 40, maybe a little bit slower. For me, projects as a 4th to 5th round pick. Has a little bit more upside than guys like Blake Martinez and Kendall Beckwith, but also a guy that didn't have as much exposure, I think, as them. So, actually, yeah, I don't know. For me, Beniquez Brown just is a little bit more of a risky draft pick. Like I said, more upside, but also I think more of a chance of bottoming out. But again, for me, projects as a 4th to 5th round pick. Probably early 4th round would be the desired draft spot for him. Alright, so move on to my number 10 linebacker and the last one before I get to the 5 outside. And this one is a guy that I might have a little bit higher than some people, but I have a lot of faith in him, and he was very good while he was in college. So I got the 6'1", 230-pounder out of Temple, Tyler Matakevich. So, again, a guy that was an absolute monster in college. This year, 138 tackles, 4.5 sacks, 15 for loss, 5 interceptions. So, led a Temple team that was extremely good this year. And, again, a guy that he's not very fast or athletic, but still not the slowest guy in the draft either. Runs about a 4.7 40, maybe a little bit closer to 4.75. But I think a guy that could be, again, a very serviceable player in the NFL, a very good leader, a guy that has a lot of good intangibles. Alright, so moving my 5 outside. So these guys are going to be my guy. Oh, Matakevich for me projects as a 4th to 5th round pick, forgot to mention that. So moving to my 5 outside, first one I've got the 6'2", 235-pounder out of Utah State, Nick Vigil. So again, projects as a 5th round or later pick for me. Put up good stats this year, but doesn't have quite the measurables to go up to it again. About a 4.75 flat 40. And a guy that I think could be a solid player in the NFL, but again, another guy that you know what you're going to get when you draft him pretty much. So move on to my number 2, and I have the 6'3", 248-pounder out of Boise State, Kamali Correa. So, this guy's a pretty versatile guy. Could play either inside or outside linebacker in a 3-4 defense. Fits in better with 3-4 defense, so I believe that's what he ran at Boise State. So, a guy that's got a very good nose to get after the quarterback. He can do multiple things on the defensive side of the ball, though. He's very good against the run. Not the fastest guy in the world, but his football instincts keep him up inside the top 5 rounds. Or first 5 rounds. So, move on to my number 3 on the 5 outside. And again, if I had to rank him, this guy would probably be the best. But he's a little bit bigger than most players, or most linebackers on this list, and that's a 6'3", 255-pounder out of Kentucky, Josh Forrest. So, Forrest, by no means, is the fastest guy in this list. He might actually be the slowest. Runs about a 4.8 to 4.9 40. But he's also very, very big guy up the middle. Will definitely play inside linebacker. He's one of the best run stuffers in this draft, in my opinion. So that's what keeps him up there. He's a very, very serviceable guy if you're just using him against the run. Maybe if he dropped 10 pounds, maybe got himself down to a 4.75 40. I mean, that's asking a lot, but it can be done. I think that could help him out a lot in the NFL. So, move on to my number 4 on the 5 outside, and I've got the 6'1", 225-pounder out of Rutgers, Steve Longa. So, I think Longa would be a very good fit as an outside linebacker. He's got a decent nose for the quarterback. A guy that, again, had over 115 tackles this year. So, a guy that can get it done at the linebacker spot. Again, fits in well as an outside linebacker. And, again, a guy that can get after the quarterback pretty well. He was probably the best player on the Rutgers defense this year. Pretty fast guy compared to the rest of the guys around him. Runs about a 4.7 flat 40. Alright, so move on to my last guy. And I've got the 6', 229-pounder out of OU, Dominique Alexander. So Dominique Alexander is actually the fastest guy on my 5 outside. Runs about a 4.65 40. Didn't put up huge stats this year. He can fit in well at either the outside or inside linebacker position. He's been playing for a while. Really, since been a starter since 2013. I believe that was his freshman year. Might have been redshirt freshman, but either way, declared early for the draft, and for me, probably goes into 5th to 6th round. But yeah, so that concludes my NFL draft linebacker rankings. We'll be coming back tomorrow with my cornerback rankings and then safeties, and then I will be done. So that's pretty much it. So yeah. What is going on, YouTube? So coming back with my edge rusher / defensive end big board. So this is going to include both defensive ends, obviously, and then also like edge rush specialists, and like if I had to, maybe like a Leonard Floyd type is a good example.